March 12, 1944. 20,000 feet above the Bismarck Sea. The morning sun rose as a blinding shield of white fire over the vast Pacific, turning every cloud bank into a glowing fortress wall. The temperature inside the unpressurized aluminum hull hovered just above freezing. Frost fringed the navigator's window, vibrating with every shudder of the engines. The wind hammered the fuselage like a relentless drum line, and every man aboard felt the familiar mixture of dread and duty tightening in his chest. 12 B-24. Liberators of the 5th Air Force crawled across the sky in a disciplined geometric box formation. 12 flying fortresses of their own kind, engines booming in a synchronized vibration that could be felt through bone. They were heavy, wide, almost brutish machines. But today, they were bait in open water. In the lead ship, Dragon Bell, Captain Aaron Delaney, 26, Iowa farm kid, leaned forward against his control column. Sweat trickled down despite the cold. His father had once told him, "Son, if a bull charges you head-on, don't run. Stand firm. Make it regret the decision." Today, the bulls wore rising sun insignia and came screaming out of the east at 300 mph. Beside him sat Lieutenant Mark Rourke, co-pilot, Boston-born, former mechanic who joined the Air Corps because he wanted a front-row seat to history. Below them, in the belly, the ball turret gunner, 19-year-old Eddie Moretz, rotated lazily, watching the ocean glitter. His hands trembled not from cold, but memory. The last mission had left 3 holes inches from his rib cage. And in the tail, hunched in an armored cocoon of glass and steel, sat Sergeant Walter Briggs, the best rear gunner in the squadron. He was quiet by nature, a man who wrote long letters home he never mailed, and carried a photograph of his older brother who never returned from Guadalcanal. The intercom crackled. "Dragon Bell to all birds. Maintain spacing. Keep those arcs tight. Intelligence reports interceptors scrambled from New Britain." A low whistle slid through the formation. They all knew what that meant. Zeros, fast, agile, deadly, and Japanese pilots loved head-on attacks against Liberators. They called them flying barns. Big, slow, clumsy, easy meat. Rourke scanned the horizon. They'll come straight in. They always do. Delaney didn't look away from the glare ahead. Then they'll meet all 10 guns. The B-24's defensive grid was unlike anything the Japanese Naval Air Arm had ever respected. Twin 50s in the nose, twin 50s in the tail, top turret, waist guns, ball turret. Every angle covered except directly below the nose, and Delaney intended to give the enemy no such opening. Far ahead, the clouds began to distort. They weren't clouds. They were silhouettes. Black pinpricks against the glare. At first just 2, then 5, then a dozen. "Bandits! 1 o'clock high! Closing fast!" Every gunner snapped, awake. Steel handles clattered. Belts of shimmering brass rounds fed into receivers. Charging handles racked back with metallic cracks. Eddie's breath fogged his plexiglass bubble as he swung the turret. Briggs steadied his boots and lined up his sight. The Zeros descended like sharks cutting through waves. Sleek white fuselages, red Hinamaru insignias, bright against the Pacific sky. Their engines howled. Their wings shimmered. And their formations split like a predator pack, preparing a coordinated kill. "They're laughing at us," Briggs muttered over the intercom. And he was right. Several Zero pilots rocked their wings in mock salute, confident of an easy slaughter. Delaney tightened his jaw. The 12 Liberators locked into a perfect defensive cube, each aircraft protecting the one beside it. Their interlocking arcs of 50 caliber fire created something the Japanese had never fully understood. A floating fortress that punished anything approaching the front quarter. The Zeros surged forward. The range closed, 1,500 yards, 1,000, 700. Inside the Liberator, the engines roared. The oxygen system hissed. Every rivet in the hull vibrated like a tuning fork. Then the forward air lit up. "Open fire!" The nose guns erupted first, long flaming streaks lashing into the sky. Brass casings clattered across the cockpit floor. The top turret joined in, then the waist guns. Then the ships to the left and right added their fire. A wall of metal appeared in the air, blazing tracers, overlapping, converging, weaving into a single incandescent storm. The lead Zero flew straight into it. It didn't explode. It disintegrated. A fireball tore through the formation's front, scattering debris like burning confetti. The pilot never had time to scream. More Zeros came behind him, shocked but committed, diving into a storm of death at closing speeds above 500 mph. The air became a tunnel of fire. Inside Dragon Bell, Delaney whispered to himself, not in fear, but in focus. Come on. Break before we do." But the Japanese didn't break. Not yet. They pressed on, straight toward 10 guns blazing. The first wave struck like a hammer against steel. 16 Zeros plunged head-on into the B-24 box, their engines shrieking in full war power, prop tips blurring into halos. Sunlight glinted off their canopies as they flicked into shallow dives. The Japanese pilots choosing speed over safety, hoping sheer momentum would tear a hole through the American formation. But at 20,000 feet, with clear skies stretching from horizon to horizon, the Liberators saw everything, and they were ready. Inside Dragon Bell, the cockpit shook under the recoil of the twin 50s. Muzzle flash lit the frosted windows with violent bursts of yellow-white fire. Captain Delaney squinted through the glare, refusing to blink. Rourke thumbed the firing switch again, sending another string of 12.7mm slugs into the sky. "Keep it centered. They're coming for the lead ship," a voice crackled across the formation net. Delaney kept the Liberator solid, steady, predictable. Because predictability in a box formation was deadly to the enemy, not the bomber. The Zeros needed chaos. The B-24s denied it. Above them, Staff Sergeant Lionel Hayes in the top turret rotated his guns with surgical smoothness. His turret hummed and vibrated as he tracked a Zero diving through the sun. Sweat dripped from his temples, despite the icy wind bleeding through the turret seams. He fired. The twin Brownings unleashed a torrent of tracers that stitched up the Zero's nose, slicing through cowling and cockpit. The Japanese fighter flared, pitched, and spiraled downward, burning like a comet, smoke trailing behind it in a broad arc. Hayes exhaled shakily. One down. But another Zero was already filling his scope. Below, Eddie Moretz in the ball turret felt the world spin around him. The Pacific flashed above, then below, then above again as he pivoted vertically. He spotted 2 enemy fighters weaving in a scissor pattern, trying to slip between the gaps in the defensive arcs. Eddie keyed the intercom, voice tight with fear. 2 bandits low. They're trying to punch through the underside. But Delaney was already pushing the nose a few degrees down, closing the gap. The formation shifted like a living organism, instinctively reinforcing weak spots. Eddie opened fire. The twin cannons spat flame beneath the bomber, leaving a glowing ladder of tracers. 1 Zero pulled up hard to avoid the fire. Straight into the top turret of the B-24 next to Dragon Bell. Its canopy exploded in a fountain of glass. The engine tore free. The aircraft snapped in half, its tail spiraling one way while its flaming front half plunged another. But still they came. Japan's elite from the 251st and 204th Air Groups were not used to backing down. Their tactics depended on intimidating heavy bombers, shaking formations apart, breaking cohesion. But these Liberators were not breaking. If anything, they were tightening. Below the formation, dozens of spent shell casings glittered in free fall, tumbling like metallic rain toward the sea far below. Inside the tail, Sergeant Briggs watched the oncoming fighters with a cold, deadly calm. He had the best field of fire in the entire formation. Every Zero passing through the rear arcs had to deal with him. A fighter flashed overhead. Another zipped past starboard. Then, tail, multiple, coming in fast. 3 Zeros aligned in perfect formation, slipping into the tail cone's deadliest approach angle. Their pilots steadied their guns, closing inside 500 yards. Briggs waited. 450 yards, 400. His finger hovered. 350. He squeezed. The tail guns detonated with thunder. Brass poured around his boots. The recoil rattled the entire rear fuselage. The center Zero flew directly into a stream of fire. Its propeller shredded itself, one blade breaking loose and spinning like a thrown scythe. Its fuselage burst into flames before the pilot could even roll away. The second Zero broke high, the third low, both evasive. Briggs tracked the low one, held steady, fired again. The Zero cartwheeled and vanished in a cloud. Yet the attack still wasn't over. The Japanese had committed nearly 40 fighters to this intercept. And if the first wave had proved anything, it was that sheer bravado would not force the Liberators to scatter. Now the Zeros adapted, climbing, spreading, circling, preparing a second, more coordinated assault. Delaney could see them forming up through the shimmering air, like wolves regrouping after a failed attack. He murmured, "Round 2." And as if in answer, the radio crackled with a warning from the wingship. "All crews, brace. They're coming again, and this time, they're angry." The Liberators tightened into their box, engines pounding in unison, gunners reloading with trembling hands, the sky already choked with smoke trails and drifting debris. The firestorm was only beginning. For a brief moment, the sky grew eerily quiet. The smoke trails drifted. Burning fragments tumbled toward the sea. The echoes of 50 caliber fire faded into a low metallic hum vibrating through each bomber's frame. But Captain Delaney knew better. Zeros never retreated. Not in the Bismarck Sea, not with American bombers threatening supply convoys below. He scanned the expanding ring of enemy shapes circling beyond effective range, like a pack of white and red arrows orbiting their prey. Their formation was disciplined, almost mathematically precise. Rourke muttered under his breath, "Hell, they're organizing. They don't do that unless they mean to take us apart." The Japanese plan. From inside a Zero's cockpit, the world looked very different. Lieutenant Yasuo Hattori, a wiry pilot with 300 flight hours and a reputation for ice-cold precision, led the second wave. He had watched the first group die in straight-line bravery and vowed not to repeat the mistake. "These Americans fire like a battleship," he told his wingmen through clenched teeth. "We strike from above, split, surround, attack from every angle at once." From his vantage point, the B-24 box looked like a slow, stubborn steel cube suspended in sunlight, dangerous only if taken head-on. Hattori respected the Liberator's firepower, but did not fear it. Not yet. With a swift hand signal, he broke his fighters into 4 attack spirals, each group rotating around the formation's perimeter like tightening nooses. Inside Dragon Bell, Lionel Hayes in the top turret saw the maneuver first. "Lead. They're coming from all directions. Not head-on this time." Delaney felt his stomach twist. this was no simple charge. This was strategy. This was a noose tightening around 12 bombers spread across only a few hundred yards of open sky. "Everyone stay locked in," Delaney ordered. "We keep the cube tight. We let the arcs do their work." Eddie Moretz and the ball turret rotated continuously, unable to pick a single target. Every glance revealed another Zero, closing, circling, climbing. His breathing quickened. "Jesus, they're everywhere." "Focus," Delaney said calmly over the intercom. "Pick your lanes. Trust the formation." The attack begins. Hattori flicked his Zero onto its side and dove from the 12 o'clock high position, straight through a glare patch of sunlight that made him nearly invisible to the naked eye. 4 fighters followed him. 4 spiraled from the right, 4 from the low left, and the last group dove directly at the tail. It was a synchronized kill strike. The first fighters burst through the top arcs, guns flashing bright sparks in the daylight. Hayes responded instantly, his twin 50s ripping through the air in long, controlled bursts. 3 Zeros broke off. 1 didn't. Hayes's tracers hammered its belly, ripping through the fuel tank. Flames erupted down its fuselage as the pilot tried, desperately, to keep control. He failed. It spun away like a torch thrown from heaven. But another Zero immediately took its place, diving at twice the angle. The Liberators take damage. The Japanese weren't the only ones scoring hits. 1 Zero strafed the left waist of Dragon Bell, its 7.7mm rounds smashing into the skin of the fuselage. Aluminum peeled like paper. A bullet punched through the radio compartment, grazing the shoulder of Sergeant Milo Crane, who collapsed against his set with a cry. "Radio's hit. I'm hit. Shoulder only. I'm okay." In the tail, Briggs felt the fuselage tremble violently as another Zero passed mere feet below him, its rounds perforating the lower structure. He tasted cordite smoke drifting down the fuselage, but he did not flinch. He did not blink. He waited for the Zero to pull up behind them, predictable, desperate. And when it did, he fired a sustained burst that stitched across its nose and canopy. The enemy fighter nosed down, trailing smoke. Inside the Zero attack spiral, Hattori was impressed, but not deterred. "These Americans fight like cornered beasts," he muttered. He pulled back sharply, letting the G-forces compress his ribs, bringing him around for another strike. He saw the Liberator formation holding firm, still overlapping, still coordinated, still defiant. He keyed his mic. "Break them, again and again until they scatter. The moment they break formation, we win." The sky turns into a pinwheel of fire. Moritz finally caught a clear shot. A Zero dove below the formation, then angled up to slip beneath a Liberator's blind spot. "No, you don't." He opened fire. The ball turret's twin Brownings spat a blinding stream of fire. The Zero's wing shredded, its roll snapped violently. It disappeared underneath the formation, trailing burning debris. But even as he scored the kill, Moretz saw something far worse. A full third wave assembling behind the second. Dozens of new fighters rose from the haze of the horizon. "Lead, Eddie here. There are more coming." Delaney's heart sank, but his voice held steady. "Then we keep fighting." The second wave was still mid-attack, tracers slashing in every direction, engines screaming, gunners shouting, oxygen masks rattling. And the sky darkened with the shadow of the third wave. The battle was escalating. The air was tightening, and the firestorm was about to become a hurricane. For a heartbeat, the formation drifted through a surreal stillness. The smoke, the drifting debris, the burnt oil haze clinging to each B-24's wings. But then the light dimmed, just enough for every American gunner to feel it in their gut. The third wave had arrived. Not 12. Not 16. At least 24 Zeros, climbing in tight, disciplined groups, their silver skins shimmering in the tropical sun. They rose like a second sunrise. Only this one promised death. Delaney whispered into his mask, "Mother of God." Rourke didn't answer. He was already adjusting trim, keeping the Liberator stable as the formation braced for an onslaught, unlike anything they had endured before. The enemy's perspective. From his cockpit, Lieutenant Yasuo Hattori saw an opening. The second wave had forced the Americans to burn ammo and tighten their box so aggressively that their arcs of fire now overlapped, strong but brittle. If he could force one ship to break position, the entire structure would unravel. Third wave, prepare. Rotate into diving spread. His voice crackled coldly over the squadron net. No hesitation, no fear. Aim for the wings. We make them bleed. The Zeros fanned outward in a perfect crescent, each fighter positioning for a staggered dive from multiple altitudes. Some would hit the top turret arcs, others would drive beneath. A few, Hattori's chosen, would attempt the deadliest run of all. A diagonal head-on slash from the 2 o'clock high. A strike angle that minimized their exposure to fire. A strike angle the Japanese believed unbeatable. They were wrong. Inside Dragon Bell, Lionel Hayes tracked the lead group from the top turret. "They're forming a scythe pattern. They're cutting straight across us." Delaney felt adrenaline burn through him. "Hold formation. Every ship keeps its spacing." Eddie Moretz rotated the ball turret until his legs quivered from the constant torque. His breath fogged the glass again. He wiped it with a gloved thumb. "They're coming low too. Fast. Real fast." In the tail, Briggs had already adjusted his stance, feet braced, guns leveled. He whispered to himself, "Come on then. Let's dance." The first strike of the third wave. Hattori dipped into a steep dive. His airspeed climbed, 250, 280, 320 mph. The Pacific blurred beneath him. The sunlight stung his eyes. He fired first. White tracers shot past Dragon Bell's nose, ricocheting off armor plating, cracking through the cockpit glass. Delaney flinched, but held his course. "Windscreens hit. But we're good," Rourke barked. Hayes answered with fury. His turret roared. His tracers cut a blazing arc across the descending fighters. One Zero's wing detached instantly, a clean shearing like a sword slicing rice paper. The fighter disintegrated in midair. But three more poured through the gap. From the right flank, Pratt & Whitney engines groaned as another Liberator's starboard wing took a burst of cannon fire. The aluminum skin peeled back, but the bomber held. The waist gunner on that ship screamed through the radio, "We've got fire in the wing, still flying, still fighting." And he was. His 50 cals rained brass onto the wind below, scoring a direct hit on a Zero trying to slip beneath the bomber's tail. The fighter erupted into a geyser of flame. Coordinated chaos. The Japanese assault now hit from 6 directions simultaneously. Top turret rounds chased fighters diving from above. Waist gunners fired at crossing targets that flickered in and out of view. Ball turrets spat fire downward in sweeping arcs. Tail guns hammered anything entering the rear funnel. The air smelled of burning gun oil, hot steel, spent cordite, and fear. A Zero streaked down the right side of Dragon Bell, so close the pilot's eyes met Briggs for a single frozen instant. The Japanese pilot grinned, a razor-thin smile of defiance. Briggs didn't hesitate. He fired a full belt. The Zero broke apart in 2 clean halves that tumbled past the tail turret like falling debris. Eddie Moretz saw another Zero lining up beneath the bomber ahead of them. He squeezed the triggers, His gun sputtered, choked, stopped, a jam. No, come on, come on. He slammed the charging handle, trying to eject the stuck casing. Sweat trickled down his temples. The Zero climbed straight toward the belly of the lead ship. Eddie ripped the charging handle back again. The round snapped free. He fired. The turret lit the sky with blinding flame, bullets hammering the Zero's cowl. The fighter exploded just yards beneath the lead B-24, showering flaming fragments across its fuselage. Eddie gasped. Got him! Got him! But he barely had time to breathe before another fighter stormed into view, cannons blazing. Hattori's breakthrough attempt. Hattori rolled his Zero into a twisting dive, cutting between the arcs of two B-24s by inches. Tracers from both ships whipped past him, missing by pure instinct and reflex. He leveled out. He lined up Dragon Bell's cockpit. He pressed the firing trigger. A blossom of fire tore across his windscreen. Hayes had found him. The top turret's tracers raked the Zero from spinner to tail. The engine burst into a fireball. Hattori tried to pull away, but his control surfaces were gone. His fighter disintegrated in a rolling inferno, arcing downward into the blue void. The tide turns. For the first time since the attack began, the remaining Zeros faltered. Their commander was gone. Their numbers were thinning. Their passes were becoming rushed, sloppy, desperate. Inside the B-24s, gunners reloaded with trembling hands. Oxygen masks hissed. Engines groaned at full military power. Every man shook, but they were still alive, and their formation was still intact. Delaney's voice crackled through the intercom. Hold steady, boys. They're breaking. They're breaking. One by one, the Japanese fighters peeled away, smoke trailing behind them, diving toward distant clouds in retreat. Some limped, some fell. Some simply vanished into the haze. But the Americans weren't cheering yet. The firestorm might have peaked. But the aftermath was only beginning. For a long moment, the only sound was the steady drone of 4 massive radial engines, tired, wounded, but still beating like the heart of a giant. The sky around the formation hung eerily still. Smoke curtains faded. Burning fragments twirled slowly toward the sea. The oily scent of cordite clung to every bomber like a second skin. Inside Dragon Bell, Captain Delaney felt the adrenaline ebb in a sudden, hollow wave. His hands trembled on the yoke. The cockpit reeked of gunpowder and cold metal. Tiny cracks spidered across the windscreen where incoming fire had struck earlier. Rourke exhaled into his oxygen mask, voice shaking despite his attempt at composure. Are we clear? Hayes, exhausted in the top turret, answered before Delaney could. I don't see any more bandits. They're gone. All of them. But the cost became clear as the Liberators regrouped. Damage report. Lead to all birds. Sound off. Damages only. One by one, voices responded across the formation net. Black Heron, waist hit, fuel leak under control. Rosie's Revenge, lost number 3 turbo, holding altitude but slow. Iron Grin, top turret out, gunner wounded. Sky Betty, engine 2 coughing but manageable. Then the quiet one. Red Lantern, we've lost our tail gunner. Briggs lowered his head inside his own turret. He didn't know the man on Red Lantern's tail, but he knew the silence. He'd heard it on other missions, from other crews. A voice missing from the net was louder than any explosion. Delaney closed his eyes for a moment. Copy, Red Lantern. We'll escort you home. Inside Dragon Bell, Eddie Moretz finally unlocked himself from the ball turret. When the hatch swung open, he stumbled into the fuselage, legs shaking so badly he could hardly stand. Crane, wounded but awake, helped him sit. "You did good down there, kid," Crane murmured. Eddie stared at his gloved hands, still trembling from the gun jam. "I just didn't want anyone to die because I froze." "Son," Crane said, gripping his shoulder, "you didn't freeze. You saved the laid ship." In the tail, Briggs remained at his station long after the danger passed, scanning the empty horizon through cracked glass, unwilling to relax until the coastline of New Guinea appeared like a smudge in the far distance. When he finally allowed himself to breathe, he whispered to no one, "Another day." Somehow. Below the bombers, far beneath the battered formation, the Bismarck Sea glittered under the sun, oblivious to the violence that had unfolded above. A few miles from their course, smoke plumes curled upward from a Japanese supply convoy the B-24s had been assigned to destroy. And they would destroy it, despite the ambush, despite the losses, despite the sky that had turned into a spinning furnace of steel. Because the Liberators were still flying, and their bombs were still aboard. Mission accomplished. When the formation finally dove toward its target zone, the Japanese Navy, expecting reinforcements from the very fighters that had been shredded minutes earlier, found itself exposed. Bomb bay doors opened. Wind screamed through the fuselage. Bombs fell. Explosions rippled across the convoy below, geysers of water and black smoke rising as transports and destroyer escorts erupted under the 500-pounders. Delaney pulled Dragon Bell up from the blast wave, engines roaring. Behind him, 11 Liberators followed, climbing out of the kill zone in battered unity. The convoy was finished. The mission was complete. The box formation had survived the firestorm. The long flight home hours. Later, as the Liberators limped toward their airfield on New Guinea, the mood aboard each bomber shifted from adrenaline to reflection. Hayes slumped in his turret, eyes half closed. His arms ached from firing so many belts he couldn't even count them. Eddie slept against a bulkhead, still wearing his oxygen mask like a terrified child clutching a blanket. Briggs wrote a single line on the back of his brother's photograph. "Still here?" And Delaney. Delaney simply watched the sun dip toward the horizon, casting the returning formation in golden light. He knew what the Japanese had realized too late. The B-24 Liberator was not a flying barn. It was not a slow, clumsy, helpless target. It was 10 guns in 10 directions, a floating hurricane of fire and steel. And when held in a tight, disciplined formation, it became a fortress the enemy could enter only at the cost of their lives. Japanese pilots no longer laughed at the Liberator. Not after this day. Not after watching head-on attacks turn into blazing pyres. Not after the sky itself had become a firestorm that swallowed dozens of fighters whole. The legend was written in smoke, metal, and blood. The B-24 Liberator, the bomber you never met head-on.